All right, man. This is episode number 61 of the Cozy Corner of Cinema. This is being recorded on Sunday, May 28th, 2023 at 11:58 a.m. Memorial Day weekend. That means a lot of us do not have to return to work until a little bit later. So for those of us who are able to get that free time, it's important to use that time wisely, to use that time exactly as you intended to, whether that be getting some reading done or writing done or watching done, any of the above or whatever it is you need to do, man. You have the free time, so you definitely want to, when you go back to work and, you go back to your 9 to 5, you realize that, like, all right, I used it wisely. I used it exactly as how I wanted to use it. Whatever that may be, it's completely up to you. It's completely in the eye of the beholder. And with it being Memorial Day weekend, hope you guys are taking a look at Vinegar Syndrome's yearly halfway to Black Friday sale. A lot of new titles that are gonna be coming. Very much looking forward to finally getting a 4K of the Boogeyman. That had a previous Blu-ray from I forget somewhat the company in the UK that always stood out to me as the red Blu-ray cases. Um, but that's directed by what the hell's his name? Uli Lamel. And very good film, and I think above all else, that kind of got overshadowed by some of the other announcements that were being put out, like, the 4K of Showgirls being released, and A Blade in the Dark, which I haven't seen, but I'm very curious about. Who directed that? I think that was, yeah, Lamberto Bava. I don't know why I always think that's Umberto Lenzi. Don't know why about that, but definitely looking forward to the Boogeyman as well. Uh, I recently saw Sick of Myself. I think I talked about that recently. I don't know if I did or not. And it's an interesting film that they would be distributing themselves, because that's a Utopia film that I initially had just thought they were going to put that out on Blu-ray themselves, but Vinegar Syndrome are putting it out themselves under their Vinegar Syndrome Pictures label. They've also distributed, I should say, Censor and The Scary of 61st, neither of which I've seen. But Sick of Myself is pretty good. It's an enjoyable enough film. It's an enjoyable tale about a narcissist who is just going to extremes to keep up her narcissistic lifestyle, and her boyfriend with her, who is also an interesting character as well. It's a film that it's by no means a very deep script. It's very surface level. It's very much like you're not going to miss what the film is trying to say, but that's all right. You know what to talk about with films like Triangle of Sadness, where no one's going to say it's a very deep or an intellectual script in terms of its message. There's no missing it, but it's all about if the film itself is good, is enjoyable. And in these cases, I've mentioned multiple times, I'm a big fan of Triangle of Sadness. I think Robert Austin's a very good filmmaker who has gotten better, I feel, like with each of his films. Each of his films that I've seen, I've enjoyed more than the last. As I said before, Force Majeure, I think, is good. The Square, I think, is very good. And Triangle of Sadness, I think, is great. And Sick of Myself is worthy of your time if you know what you're getting into. It's a good lead performance by the main actor. I don't know her name. This is a Norwegian film. Kristen Kujath Thorpe. Okay. And I think her boyfriend in the film, or no, was that, I think, not her boyfriend. I don't have names up. I don't have names and pictures up right here, so either way, the other male actor is very good as well. Worth watching for sure. I definitely liked it. With all these titles that are available, they are half off for the weekend until tomorrow, and this is being recorded. Unless you're a subscriber, then they're going to be half off as is for most of the titles. But anyways, there's plenty of good titles here. A lot of good partner label titles that are released. So if you're curious about any of them, now is the time to really kind of take hold and grab some of these, man. Because there's some really terrific stuff here that's available. I read the other day, interestingly enough, a little while ago, I talked about reading the book Anger, written, I must have directed, written by Bill Landis. And I talked about Kenneth Anger, the prolific, experimental, transgressive filmmaker who's made many influential avant-garde films. Lucifer Rising, Scorpio Rising, Invocation of My Demon Brother. Fireworks was, I think, technically a second, but from what I remember, I think he considers it his first. It's the one that, he showed a lot in the, I think part of the, what was it called? The Magic Lantern cycle, when, if I'm remembering correctly, so I apologize if I'm getting this incorrectly, but when he would show certain of his films together, as I think that's what he called the Magic Lantern cycle. But I should say he passed away on May 11th. So actually passed away a couple of weeks ago, actually. But I think I read it the other day, so I guess the news may have not gotten out immediately. But he was 96, man. And after reading that book, which came out, I believe, in the early 2000s or late 90s, because I think he did some stuff after in the mid 2000s. But I think, technically speaking, where the book goes up to, I think might be primarily, it primarily talks about Lucifer Rising sort of being at the end of his films. Although I don't remember if they talked about the film Hollywood Babylon, which I also say, of course, he's very notable for his book work with Hollywood Babylon in 1959 being a sort of gossip tell-all of the underbellies of Hollywood, many of which have been debunked, many of which are just pure speculation. Some of them have nuggets of truth, but overall it's primarily nuggets of nonfiction in a fiction novel. It's sort of like Faces of Death, It's like, all right, well, a lot of this is fake, but some of this is real, and a different medium, of course. And he also did Hollywood Babylon 2 in 1984, which he didn't want to do, but finances were tough. I should really say that to check out that book, man. To check out Anger by Bill Landis. It's just such a fascinating portrait of just this guy and going through the late 20th century when all these just really cool different filmmaking movements were happening. Great portions of him in the 60s and sort of the experimental filmmakers of the time and a lot of the transgressive artists or pop culture artists, intertwining with him. And there's some great stuff by Andy Warhol in there, who I find to be a very fascinating person. I find him as a person more fascinating than his work, but he came up recently in another book that I read, Shooting Midnight Cowboy, directed by the great John Schlesinger. And there's a whole great section about him in that book and one of the places they were filming at. And both these books are definitely worthy of your time, and they're going to make you want to watch these films for sure. I bought that BFI collection of Kenneth Anger's work shortly after I finished reading it, which I still haven't cracked open yet, but I got it in the other room. And of course, after you read Shooting Midnight Cowboy, it'll make you want to watch the film, which I haven't watched in quite a number of years, and I still have not gone back to rewatch since that book, but it is on the radar for some point. I also read today, interestingly enough, this is just a nice little tidbit, that today is the birthday of one Jean-Pierre Léaud, if I said his last name correctly. I notice I've been pronouncing a lot of French names incorrectly lately in a lot of French films, but most known for, in my opinion, I shouldn't say the best, because I'm a firm believer that there's no such thing in objectivity in art, but I should say my favorite French film, The 400 Blows, 1959, directed by Francois Truffaut. And that started a whole mini-series of films, like Stolen Kisses and Bed and Board, and there's about 5 or 6 of them, which I haven't seen them all, but I've liked all of them. But he's also been in plenty of other films, Irma Vep and Masculine Feminine, who's in some of Godard's work. And even recently he's been in stuff like Le Havre from 2011, which is a very, very good film as well. But 79 this year, so I just wanted to mention that if you're unfamiliar with his work. I think he's one of these guys where if you've seen enough French films, then you'll see the face pop up. It's like you watch enough Italian films and you're gonna hear Edward Mannix's voice, more than once, man. You watch I should say Italian genre films. You watch enough Dario Argento or Lucio Fulci or any kind of genre from Roberto Bava, you're gonna hear that voice. Anyways, with that said, I want to talk about, I guess I'll talk about this main documentary that I watched recently, because I've mentioned before in the show, I think that a good documentary can be better than a great film, because you find yourself going down more into the real-life parts of the real-life rabbit hole of the subject in question. and find yourself fascinated with the context at which that documentary was released. I've talked about many great documentaries in the show. The Bridge, Hands in a Hard Body, The Devil at Your Heels, High School. It might be it, I believe. Anyways, doesn't matter. Moving on from there. We're going to talk about a terrific documentary from 2011. And just to give you a time frame of how long it takes me to watch certain films that are recommended, I take every film recommendation seriously. For the most part, unless it's rarely is there a case where I'm just completely disinterested in a film and I just have absolutely zero interest in watching it. It's extremely rare. I try to watch everything I can, but this was a film I heard about on a podcast back in 2011, and it is now 12 years later, and I'm just now watching it. Because my watch list right now, I mean, I've only in the past 2 years or so gotten serious about putting it all together. Because I don't know, I think people format what they watch differently. I never have a problem with what to watch. It doesn't, I have a whole system set up with what I will watch next, whether owning or streaming or anything like that. But my current list let me see if I can pull this up here. My current list to stream as is on various streaming services online or on the internet or anything like that is I currently have about 1,098 titles just purely streaming. And it's growing more and more every day. So just a bit of a context in terms of how long it can take me to watch some films, but glad I finally did, better late than never. A fascinating documentary, written and directed by Jon Foy, also co-written by Colin Smith. This is the documentary Resurrect Dead, The Mystery of the Toynbee Tiles. And like I said, I remember hearing about this a long time ago. It sounded incredibly fascinating, and already they were talking about something supernatural with this or something otherworldly. It's, that's a whole other conversation right there. But what this is that this spans over about 2 decades or so. We have this main guy, Justin Dewar, who has been fascinated with these tiles that have been popping up around certain parts of the country and even in South America, I believe it was. And it's these tiles that are part of the ground. They're like part of the pavement. It's like part of the actual road. And what's interesting is that the tiles themselves are in places where they're in places like in entryways of like tunnels to a highway. So somebody couldn't have walked out there and done it. It's on a highway. But they have various cryptic messages. And the main one in the film, let me pull this one up here. The main one in the film that kind of kickstarts the catalyst of this is a cryptic one, such as Toynbee idea in Kubrick's 2001 Resurrect Dead on planet Jupiter. And you think, what the hell does that mean? And then we get more tiles that have popping up that are similar kinds of messages. A lot of them refer to Resurrect Dead on planet Jupiter and Kubrick's 2001. And let's see here. I want to see if I can find a different kind of one. Some of them are much more degraded than others. Some of them are unlegible now, or illegible now, I should say. House of Hades, One Man versus American Media in Society 2012. I think that might be a newer one. No idea. Let's see what this one says. House of Hades, tiles made from the ground bones of dead journalists. Plague plus famine to them all. And you're going, what the hell does that mean? And actually the documentary is in part trying to answer what the hell does these tiles mean, who and what is going on with them. They talk about they break down each line of it. The first line, Toynbee idea. Second line, in movie 2001. Third line, Resurrect Dead. Last line, on planet Jupiter. They break down each of them, but also the mystery. And this is what I say that a good documentary can be better than a great film. Is you are completely captivated in the story because already your mind is racing to various questions. What the hell does this mean? How are these being placed around? They're still going on. What is happening here? And this documentary, it was, well, there's not this is one that's also a little tricky to talk about because it is a mystery that every sequence in the film is unlayering more and more and more, where he starts reaching out. And this is like the early days of the internet. So this guy Justin Dewar is going online and is talking about, hey, does anybody know what's going on with these tiles? And he finds other people that are like, yeah, I found these two. What's going on? We don't have answers. And they start to break down what the tiles mean. And then he starts getting involved with other people who may know more about what's going on with these, and they have suspects as to who's doing it. And even though this film was made in 2011, it's sort of the last real update of the story has been when this film came out, because you get invested in any documentary. You want to research about the film afterwards, research if there's been any updates on anything, if it's, a situation where the story might still have some holes that are not completely filled. And this only has this partially, but when you look up kind of what's happened in the last 13 years since the documentary came out, there's not a lot of updates really on this, because when the documentary reaches a conclusion, there is something of a conclusion to the story, but it's not a closed book to the story. There are still some questions that are not answered in this, that won't be answered, for various reasons. But it's a film that when you start really just getting engaged with the mystery and certain things are being... Oh, I should also say as well, what's very fascinating, and which the part of the film that I loved, because when I was probably about 5 or 6 years ago, maybe more than that, I've always had kind of a fascination with pirate broadcasting. I think everybody kind of knows about the Max Headroom kind of channel hijacking, like some pretty famous one, still unsolved to this day. About if you don't know that whole story, I recommend looking that up. That's a fascinating account. One of my favorite YouTube channels that I still watch sometimes is this guy, the Oddity Archive. He talks about all those kind of like when I read that, I was talking about that book a little while ago, American Ecstasy. And that was one that had like that was an older kind of public on-demand kind of adult networks, and all that stuff's fascinating. And what this film does is that so there's a part in the film where he talks about that at certain weird times that the local residents of this area, they're getting these strange messages on their TV. It was like and you're like, what the hell is all that about? And how it connects to these tiles. He goes to this convention of these kind of amateur kind of broadcasting enthusiasts, or like ham radio enthusiasts. I don't remember exactly what it was, but all that stuff was just so fascinating. That's a whole other just personal interest right there. I find great. But like I said before, when it comes to a film like this, is that you just can't take your eyes off the screen. You're just wondering, how far does this go? What can be answered? And by the time you get to the conclusion of the film, there is that feeling of satisfaction where even though not everything is answered, there are just some things that aren't going to be answered. I mean, and when you see the film and understand, you do walk away feeling like, okay, there's you really got something out of it that's more long lasting than a great film that you can watch and you don't remember. There's plenty of... I saw a film the other day I thought was nearly great. I thought it was really exceptionally directed. The cinematography was incredible. The acting was incredible. Will I remember in a year? I mean, only time will tell, man. But, there's documentaries I've seen 10, 15 years ago that I'm still thinking about. I'm still thinking about Capturing the Freedmans when I saw it in high school. I'm still thinking about The Thin Blue Line. All these just incredible films, Dear Zachary. These documentaries that, I know some of these are more somber than others, so they kind of stick with you for that reason. But this was one that I just was completely engaged with from beginning to end. It is, I don't know the availability of it, but I watched it on YouTube, so it is on there. But a completely fascinating story, and it's short too. It's 86 minutes, so you can watch this pretty quickly. But yeah, if any and all documentary fans or fans of mystery, this is one that I think I prefer this kind of format for a story being told, because this is something where you could definitely see, and I'm sure the Netflix miniseries are good and all that. I've heard exceptional things about all the true crime ones that have kind of had a bit of a surge in popularity in the last 10 or so years. But sometimes when I see the 6 or 7 kind of episode format, I really start to question whether or not it really warrants that. I remember the one about the what the hell is his name? What the hell was his name? Oh God. Oh, that's right. Yeah, it's the, and I won't get into the details of it because that's a whole other conversation. But the Luca Magnotta, who is he got in for me online for putting some disturbing videos on the internet, and then he ended up murdering a guy. And I heard that Netflix did a series about that, and I'm thinking, well, the story's not that. This could be a 2 hour documentary. There's not that much there to the story, you know. I mean, it's just like, so something like this, I can see stretched out to 5 or 6 episodes when there's just not that much there for that. But for an hour and a half documentary, it's like perfect. You're engaged from beginning to end, and I love this. This is one of the best things I've seen this year. And reminds me of another documentary that I have never talked about on the show, but is another one that I watched a couple years ago, and just that was so fascinating, man. I think this one got a little bit more attention. I remember when it came out, and I didn't see it for about a couple years or so. But it's one that, like Resurrect Dead, it's a lot better. You know, with these documentaries, you gotta walk on eggshells recommending them, because if you give too much of these films away, that's not to say you won't still like it, but because you already have certain expectations up to a point. And this documentary was Tickled from 2016, and the setup for this film is great. You have this journalist, David Farrier, who works. So he works for this. He's from New Zealand. Works for this online publication, and he comes across these. I don't remember if it was one video or multiple videos of these shirtless, kind of good-looking guys. They're tied up and they're being tickled. And he's like, "What the hell is this all about?" And but he thinks it's kind of humorous. He has like a couple. I think from what I can remember, I didn't write down any notes for this or anything like that. But so he comes across these, and he's like, "All right, I'm gonna write an article about this. This is strange," because I think that's what he like primarily wrote about, these kind of like oddities, these odds and ends, these kind of strange things. So he writes about this. He says like, because he's gay himself, so he says like, there's a weird kind of homoerotic, feeling with these videos. I mean, you got these shirtless guys, and they're tickling each other, and it's like, what the hell is going on here? He gets a message one day from somebody involved in these videos, and it's a very aggressive message calling him various homophobic slurs. He's saying there's nothing homoerotic about this, like how dare you, this and that. And so what would have been just a kind of a funny little story starts to snowball into something bigger, where David Farrier's like what the hell is with this message? Right? I gotta see what is going on with this story. And there we get the story of Tickled. And that's where I want to leave it. I'd recommend not watching the trailer. I don't think the trailer gives him a lot away, but for a film like this, I remember when I watched it, I was just completely on the edge of my seat. The tone differences in this film are so well done. This goes from absurd and comedic to, at moments, frightening for the filmmakers, where you're wondering how deep does this go? And two, how far are they willing to go for this documentary? Some of these people, are they dangerous? We get into some characters in this film who, there's some sketchy people, and you're like, what is going on with this story? But like what I was saying, Resurrect Dead, you just cannot take your eyes off the screen, and you're finding yourself going, how the hell is this story going to end? And one thing I do makes almost mandatory if you watch this film is that there is a follow-up. So the film is released, plays at some festivals or whatever, and then HBO did a 30-minute follow-up where they talk about, they recap the film a little bit, how the story ended and all that, and then the next part of the story, and where that ends, that could possibly lead into another documentary. I would love to see another documentary, but it's a film, man. This is more tense than certain genre films, man. Because I mean, for one, the most shallow reason being that it's a documentary, so you're watching this all, and you know that this guy David Farrier is still alive, so he didn't die or anything like that. But you're just wondering like how far is this guy willing to go to make this film? Something that would have just been a simple story has now turned into this whole other big thing. And actually looking at his filmography here, so he did the follow-up, which was 2017, which was the 30-minute one I was talking about. I think this is the same one. Yeah, okay, this is actually about 20 minutes. And then, looking at his filmography for some of his later work, he did a series, short-lived, I think, miniseries for Netflix called Dark Tourist, also a documentary, From a Nuclear Lake to a Haunted Forest. New Zealand filmmaker and journalist David Farrier, I might be saying his last name wrong, I understand, visits unusual and often macabre tourism spots around the world. This guy could have been directing Mondo Cane if he was around. He also did around that, I should say. And then he also has a new feature. Now, this one I got to see for sure. A new documentary that came out last year called Mr. Organ. Journalist David Farrier is drawn into a game of cat and mouse with a mysterious individual. Delving deeper, he unearths a trail of court cases, royal bloodlines, and ruined lives in this true story of psychological warfare. Very cool. And it's what I was talking about before when I was talking about some of Michael Moore's films, is that whether you like or dislike his films, I think it's undeniable that he had a monumental part in bringing documentaries into the mainstream in the 21st century, especially after the success of films with Bowling for Columbine and Fahrenheit 9/11. These films that no matter what side of the argument you were on, they had people talking, and I think that's something that now is not really. I mean, there's exceptions, of course. There's documentaries that come out that do cross over into the mainstream kind of acclaim. I remember in I think I talked about before when the Mr. Rogers one came out. The Won't You Be My Neighbor? That was one that seeing the trailer for that in a major cinema and a major chain cinema was something exceptional. And then a documentary like Free Solo came out that the National Geographic made, which was a terrific film. I mean, I think that that was playing across like IMAXs and stuff, and I know IMAXs, they used to show a lot more of their own made documentaries, and which were, should you get the opportunity to see a documentary filmed at IMAX, you're in for just something incredibly exceptional. But that's why every documentary that's out, I mean, I try to just be totally on that. I saw one the other day, I should say yesterday actually, about Yogi Berra, was a famous baseball player, and just the incredible life that he's had. And it was somebody who I had no idea who he was. I couldn't tell you much about baseball, but that documentary was just incredibly moving. It was just a beautiful tribute to someone who's been overlooked, and sort of made the runt of the joke, or the bunt of the whatever it is. But yeah, so I mean, there's just of all the genres, that's the one you really want to be kind of more on, because there's just so many terrific ones that are gonna stay with you. Like I said, like Capturing the Freedmans, and all the Frederick Wiseman ones, Titty Cup Follies and High School and Hospital and Model, and it's just like you just all the. I mean, I've said before, most of his work is on Canopy, which is a free service through your local library, because outside of Canopy, his films can be a little tricky to come across, and they are available to buy on his website, but for pretty exorbitant prices, to say the least. But I mean, amazing documentary filmmaker, just incredible. I talked about that film High School a little while ago, and thought it was just an incredible film. Just one of the best films I had seen, period, last year. But definitely get on that, man. Get on his work. Get on more documentaries. You're gonna get more out of it, man. See documentaries of subjects, of topics that you wouldn't normally see. Some things that may seem uncomfortable, or you may disagree with, whether ideologically or politically or anything like that, because by doing that, you're going to form yourself a more educated and full opinion rather than just whatever is tailored to you. Yeah, that's really all I have for this one. It's supposed to be the tradition. I always have more films I intend to talk about, but I just don't have the time to get to it. And time is something that we don't want to waste. So that'll be it for this one. It's a beautiful day out. Oh my gosh, it's just like perfect grilling weather, man. You got to take advantage of days like these, man. It's just something else. It almost makes you emotionally go outside to look at it. It's truly exceptional. But have a great weekend. Be aware of Memorial Day. Remember those who have fallen. It's just it's going to be a good time this weekend. All right, guys. All right, that's all I got.